This is the 19th season of Bass Talk Live. BTL is presented by Bass Cat Boats, Strike King Lures, Aftco, Pro Guide Batteries, X-Zone Lures, Shoreline Boat and RV Repair, Spro, Gamakatsu, Big Bite Baits, The Bass Tank, Denali Rods, Beatdown Outdoors, and Sunline.
BTL coming at you.
Hey, we're back.
With different scenery now.
Yes, this is BTL Bass Talk Live, where we're going to talk about bass fishing. It is part 2 of our show with Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank. And if you guys listened this morning at 8:30, we were on the water. We had both. We have identical boats. I didn't realize that before. We both have 23 Bass Cat Cougars.
Yep.
This is my first Cougar. I've gone Puma, Lynx, Puma, Cougar.
So did your last Puma, was that before the STS?
It was the one right before the STS.
Yeah.
And then there was such a demand for the STS when this boat was ordered. It was like a year out.
Yeah.
So, but I've been very pleased with the Cougar. One of the things that I was hoping to do with the live with both of our boats was to kind of go through some of that and kind of the setup there, because with that front deck of the Bass Cat, it makes for some interesting configurations, and there's really some good setup options with the way that Rick does the front of that cat.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I'm a cat guy.
Yeah.
You know, I've not made any bones about that. And you know, I got a my 23 this year, and I looked at the Puma STS, and I still, in the back of my mind, I'm like, should I have gone that route? But the more I'm getting comfortable in this boat, the more I'm falling in love with it. I'm having to relearn to drive it.
Yeah.
You know, I was briefly out of cat, you know, I had cats before, and briefly out of it, you know, and it's a whole different animal. And this is the first Merc 4-stroke that I've ran.
Sounds good when you start her up.
Boy, it sounds good. And so
if you missed the first part, you go back and watch the first half hour. It was kind of a side image manifesto. Like I said, our plan was to dive into a lot of it, but I kind of like it. It's a half-hour segment, regardless of what you want run side imaging wise, especially if you run a Garmin. There were a dozen tips in there to maximize your side imaging, to find it, to use it in coordination with the mapping, the 2D. Go back and watch that first half hour. We kind of got ran off the water. Both Scott and I are not fans of lightning. There's some guys that it does not bother. Have you been in the boat with any of those dudes who are just kind of like, oh yeah, there's some lightning over there, and they just keep fishing? And I'm always like, yeah, there's also a dock over there that we could get under. I'm always the first one to get under a dock when there's electricity in the air.
And see, and I'm even more extremely not a fan of lightning, because I don't want to be the bearer of bad news here, but being under a dock's not going to protect you from lightning. It's just not.
It helps, doesn't it?
It's a false sense of security.
Well, I'll go with a false sense of security.
Exactly. And that's what it is. You're going to be dry. But yeah, I'd rather be under a dock than be out there and be the highest point on the lake for sure. But it's always tough, you know, you know, I jumped into a jackpot tournament this weekend, and a little storm rolled through. And it was one of those, what do you do? What do you do in a tournament? At what point do you say, because, you know, a lot of these local clubs, they don't have the ability to say, guys, get off the water, you know, that's lightning. So it's on the angler. And it's a tough call to make when you say, all right, I'm going to call my day when other people are going to be out there still competing. And it's like, okay. And it's just a personal thing. You have to say, you know, is this worth risking the potential of my life? And that's what you have to put in that. And maybe when I was younger, I would have tried it. Maybe it's with age.
Well, age and desperation, I think, because I remember a couple years ago, there was a lightning storm that came through, and I was right in the thick to make it to the Elite Series. And there were a couple tournaments left, and I did not have a co-angler, I don't believe.
Yeah.
And I scared myself, because it's the only time in my life that I remember going, I don't care if I get hit by lightning. I have to fish through this.
Wow.
I just put my head down and I fished, and it was dumb to do, but I knew everyone else was, and I knew that one fish could make that much of a difference, and I didn't want to sit there afterwards and go, well, what if I hadn't fished for that hour and a half? Like if I had fished, maybe I would have been able to call, or maybe that would have been the difference to make the elite series. But then I scared myself afterwards by going, holy cow, that totally took logic out of the equation, because you're not going to make the elite series if you get hit by lightning. Anyway, that's right. Depending on how it is. Like I remember Harold Allen saying he's been hit 3 times. Once while running, and it fried, his flasher. Yeah. And it was, rudimentary electronics at the time, but he said it killed everything. Everything was fried. Yeah. Once while crossing a bridge while towing his boat, and then once while fishing. And he wasn't doing anything real sketchy. Yeah. I can't. And it probably changed for me. I remember again fishing more of a regional trail, and we went out, and it was kind of those pop-up storms. As in Oklahoma, we get pop-up storms. Mm-hmm. It's kind of what happened with this one. Yeah. And came out of nowhere, and I was trying to run away from it. I was like, you know what? It's on the northern of the lake. I'm going to go run south. And so I was looking at blue sky, and about 100 yards off the bow of the boat, a bolt of lightning hit the water. And running very hard, I made a 90-degree turn. Them cats turn hard. Yeah. And I hooked it, and I went, and we went in probably a little bit harder than the buoys would have suggested I should have been. Where were you?
On Gibson, actually. Okay. Yeah. And so I ran in there, and listen, I'll be the first to tell you, if I got a ticket because I was trying to save my life.
Oh, I've ran Eufaula Cove before when it's lightning and storming. Big time. Like, I mean, I ran it at 50. They're the only ones out there, and it's safety.
Exactly. And that's it. I think
not
that
recently, I'm talking years ago.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd do it again if it came down to that.
100%. Give me the ticket. I'll do it. And people say, well, you're there's boats in the slips. And guys, the amount of wake that we put off on pad
is less than when you're plowing 6.7, barely not on pad.
Or the wakes that waves, there's, again, that's a whole conversation, but safety's paramount, if we're going to talk safety. And so, but that's when it really changed for me. Like, okay, this is not something to mess around. And then we've all got stories of that. So we're getting sidetracked on what happened today on lightning.
Talk about whatever the hell we want to talk about.
But yeah, so I think we made the right call. I think it was a good start. I mean, I could have legitimately continued to talk.
And I was hoping you would. I mean, I was looking at Juice, who's filming, and I said, man, this is good stuff. Yeah. So like I said, we upgraded our audio on the water. We have good video on the water as long as we have a 5G segment. This is something that I hope to incorporate. I am incorporating into BTL kind of for the remainder of the year and moving forward, is the educational segment. There's a lot going on in the bass fishing world right now. Yeah, there is. And I'm kind of in the mix, or I wouldn't say I'm struggling, but I'm trying to navigate talking about rules versus tournament results versus rumors versus getting to know guys. Like we had Greg Bohannon on yesterday, first time he'd been on BTL. Learned a lot about Greg, really enjoyed that interview. Today was an educational aspect, but still trying to stick with the 3 E's: entertain, educate, and engage. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. I kind of prefaced this show with, if you had some questions for Scott, and we did get some email questions. So let's jump into the email questions right now. As the owner of the Bass Tank, you obviously know a lot about it. And that's the other thing. Like I think, at least for me as a fish nerd, even if I don't 100% understand it, I like going as deep as you possibly can into the nitty gritty and the technical stuff. I know you're going to lose some guys who are just like, tell me what button to push to get it to work. Yeah. But I think there's also value in just having a rudimentary understanding of when you hit that button, what is actually happening to your unit under the water and what it's seeing. So I like when you go 8 layers too deep on something that you can do just with one button. I think that's valuable. Yeah. And the other thing is, those guys that you've heard the term, you don't know what question to ask. Yep. And those guys that say, just tell me what button to push, it's because they don't know what happens after that. And then, so when you teach them to push that button, then they start saying, oh, okay, some cool stuff happens. Then it expands their ability to get deeper than that. It's not because they're not smart enough. It's just that it's overwhelming. At the end of the day, this stuff is overwhelming.
I made a doodle. I'll just say it that way when we were rigging my boat, and I got done. I'm like, I'm glad I know what that looks like, because if I just handed this to somebody, someone would say, what in the world? And in my mind, it made perfect sense, but it's because there's layers upon layers upon layers upon layers. And that's where it gets overwhelming, because, you know, if someone walked into your studio and they just said, how do we make this work? Well, everything has a piece and a function.
Yeah. And it took me a long time to figure out how to make this work, and I wouldn't have been able to without Jeffries. But now I understand, you know, I can look and see what's working.
Yep.
If something stops working, I can say, this is this piece that drives this piece, which
100%.
causes this. All right, let's get to some questions.
Let's do it.
Keith asks, he's having a no source issue with his active target. And I didn't preface you with on this one, so if you don't know,
it's fine.
So far, there hasn't been one that you didn't know. I'm having a no source issue with my active target. My forward facing will work for a few minutes, then says no source. It'll sometimes come back on, but always goes back to no source. When it's working, it's amazing, but for some reason it won't stay on. My firmware on my HDS 12-inch transducer is up to date, so not sure what the issue is with the product.
So what this would sound like to me initially, the first thing that I would check if this boat was in our shop would be power to the active target box. It sounds like maybe there's a loose connection, either on the negative. You guys heard talk about that. The negative is the most important connection. But check the power of that. And so the simple way to check is whenever you get this no source, go look at the box and see what is flashing, and see if your network's flashing, see if your power is flashing. If those have gone away, we know we've got a power issue. Other than that, the firmware should be good. Other than the box itself may be going bad. I mean, I don't know the age of it, you know, but it's possibility that the box itself is just literally failing. You know, it's a hardware failure. So this could be a warranty issue if it's still within that. Probably would be. I would expect it to be, but check that. And that's where I would start for sure.
All right. Here's a question from Randy. He asked that question about turning the transducer off. Is that something you can answer now, or should we?
I'll do my best. Okay. Did he say whether
he said, what is the best way to turn off the transducers mounted on the trolling motor? He said in his circumstance, he has a Livescope Plus and a Humminbird 360 mounted on the trolling motor when moving from spot to spot. You need to?
No. So, okay. So if that's the case, we're just worrying about moving. There's no need to. The 360 has a water switch on it. So when it's out of the water, it stops rotating and stops pinging.
Okay.
So it handles it itself. The, what was the other transducer on the
Livescope Plus?
Yeah. So if you're going to be idling around and graphing for a long time, and that thing, and if you're in Oklahoma, dude, that transducer gets hot. You can turn it off, and that transducer, when you first turn it on, will say it's overheated because it's just that hot.
And you just dump it in the water. And
just dump it in the water and move it around. Now, if you pick up and move, we've got the old 255 air conditioning, 2 windows down at 55 miles an hour, right? So you've got, through convection, you've got actually cooling that transducer. I don't ever turn mine off.
But there's really no need to turn it off.
But if you want to, the way to do it with Livescope is just on the Livescope menu, hit options or menu, depending on what software firmware you're at. And then there's a transmit button. And just hit transmit, turn it off. It'll stop transmitting.
Okay. His second question is, what advice, recommendations, and you kind of went into this a little bit today on side imaging. What advice, recommendations do you have using electronics, Livescope, side imaging, and 360 in lakes? He uses Clear Lake as an example, with a substantial amount of grass and shallow water. This is going to go back to palette, color, and what was the gain,
the noise rejection. Yeah,
stuff.
Absolutely. And that's it. Hopefully he watches that, and because we touched on it.
Yeah, but I would just go back. You don't even have to go through any of the side or any of that stuff, because we went through that. Didn't you say that green one is great for finding shallow grass edges on the side?
I like it. And you can run your contrast, because what it's going to look like, your grass edges are going to look like fluffy pillows. You know, it's going to look like you're going to have just this desktop here is slick, and you're just going to have this weird cloud fluff, and you're going, what is that? And then that is a not as dense a grass. And then if you see a real dense grass, dude, it's going to stick out like a sore thumb. And but I will say that the thing with side imaging on what, like the situation he described, color palette is going to be one of the number one things. Color palette and getting that contrast set right. Those are the two things that I would focus on to really help to find that grass.
All right. Bobby has a question, a very broad question that I think I can kind of take in a more direct. He just said, any tweaks on setting and transducer angles and split screen with map and Livescope. I'll start off by this. There's a lot of live on between Bassmaster and the BPT and the MPFL now. I don't think I've ever seen anyone running a split screen Livescope.
Yeah.
So is that a thing to do, or is there you run a 9-inch screen down there, but can you just explain why you don't see anybody running split screen mapping? And
so usually, and I understand where he's coming from, because this is a lot, and it comes down to, at the end of the day, everyone's got a budget.
Yep.
So when we talk about the guys on the elites, the MPFL, BPT, these are guys that probably have a sponsorship, have the ability to go run. I'm running 4 graphs. So it doesn't make sense. But let's be real. There, in my life, I couldn't afford. There was a time when I ran 2 graphs, one at the front, one in the back. That's all I could afford. And so everyone has a budget, and budget is not what's in the bank account. It's what you can mentally let go of. And so there's some guys that will. What happens when you start splitting up Livescope, the best way to describe it is, imagine a picture on a wall that is 12 inches big. And I say, hey, what is that person in that picture doing? And you say, oh, they're eating. You're 6 feet away from it. You say, oh, they're eating. And then now I have that same 12-inch screen, and I play a movie, and I say, what was that person 2 scenes ago doing? And your brain doesn't process it fast enough, because it was a moving image. And because it's live, you need bigger to see it. And so that's why I do tell people, buy the biggest screen you can afford, and don't give up any real estate. Okay. And that's why you see guys with big units. Now, if you're going to run a 16, where you can have basically a 12-inch screen and then run mapping, that is. But at the end of the day, you can absolutely
still, then you're going to have a smaller live scope screen than you would with a 9-inch.
Yes, but when you go to, well, that's not true with the 16. The area that, because you split the screen, it's not just split down the middle. You can adjust the pane size. So you can have just a little bit of segment of a mapping, and still have a really big screen if you're running a 16, if you want to run one big unit. Now there's a cost to that, no doubt. Again, we get back into that budget versus everything else. But running 116 compared to 212s, from a footprint standpoint, takes up less room. And so, and less power requirements, less everything, it's a little bit cleaner.
So if you just wanted to run a map, like what you can get a 9, can you get a 7-inch screen even if you wanted to, just for straight mapping, and you don't have to get any of the transducers with it or anything. You can get it. It's going to have your mapping up front. What is like a 7 or 9? I'm looking on the basstank.com now.
See, we don't even really sell 7s a whole lot, because there's just not been a demand for them. We've had a few, and they take forever to sell, because typically what happens is a guy is if he's going to split it, he's going to come in with a 10 or a 12.
Yeah, but you're under $1,000. Easily.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Or you could even go in and buy a used one that's a couple generations old that still runs.
As long as the same family, that's what it is. And because you do want it in on the network, so you can share waypoints. So when you mark something, at the console, it's up there, because that's the whole deal. Let's set our waypoint on the side imaging of the console, and then go use Livescope to find it. We'll get my map to get me back close to that waypoint, scan around. Oh, there it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sam asks, I have the LVS 32. That's the original one, or the last iteration.
That was Gen 1 Livescope. That was the first Livescope.
Wow, and it stayed out for a while too.
It did, yeah.
I have the classic pizza slice type lines, and the image isn't all that good. Is this from my trolling motor angle or the Garmin mount? Forward view is good quality. He said he's trying it in the perspective mode.
Yeah, so the perspective is a unique thing, if you will. So you've got the pizza slices. This is where I wish I could talk to people. Is it happening when the trolling motor starts, or is it like if you bump the trolling motor, the button on, or is it all the time? If it's happens whenever the trolling motor is bumped, that trolling motor is giving off some interference. Okay. And some of the trolling motors out there, as they age, the armatures start failing, and they just need to be rebuilt, and so they start giving interference.
Okay, that leads me to a question that I have, because I got a buddy who's dealt with massive trolling motor interference.
Yeah,
there's static whenever he hits the trolling motor button.
Yeah,
explain that to me. I don't compute how when you hit a trolling motor, it interferes with what you're seeing on your graph like that. I have not made that connection between the trolling motor and the graph.
So this is, I'll try to keep this.
Is that a fair question?
It's absolutely. And so it's a good one. When we have transducers, whether it's a Livescope transducer, whether it's a side and down transducer, whether it's a 2D transducer, we always talk about frequency, right? And frequency is the signal coming out and returning. So we have a transducer that is a transmit and then a receive. So there's two paths to that.
Okay.
All right. So we have this receiver. Let's just look at the receive side of this. The trolling motor is an electrical motor. And the way it works is electricity basically creates a magnetic field and it drives magnets inside. That's the layman's way of saying it. But basically it kicks magnets. So basically the magnetic field rises and then it collapses. And every time it does, it moves. So think of an internal combustion engine that a piston comes to the top. There's a fire and it's like it gets punched back down. There's none of that, but think of the magnets.
So the magnets that are like pushed against each other that make the whole thing.
The magnets are being pushed against the electromagnetic field that's being generated by the electricity.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't get that, but I get it.
Okay. So anytime we have rotating equipment, and I don't care if I took that pin, I started spinning it, and I had a receiving device that could receive frequencies. We use an oscilloscope is one of the things that, back in the day, it can pick up that frequency because every piece of rotating equipment has a frequency. Well, your biggest frequency generators on your boat are in fact your electric trolling motor. And so it's creating an EMF field itself. So whenever the electricity is applied to the motor,
electromagnetic field.
Hey, look at it. I'm teaching him. He's learning. And so that EMF has a frequency.
Okay.
Because it's going up and down. It's cycling up and down. That cycle up and down is the frequency.
And it's emitting it into the water.
It's emitting it into the water. And guess what's right there next to the trolling motor? Transducer. That is
it's receiving.
There it is. He said it. Transmit and receive. So the sonar, the transducer is listening for any frequencies that are out there. And when you hit that button on that, boom, it says, here it is. Now I'm going to cook your noodle. Whenever we have variable speeds, whenever we have variable speed trolling motors, that frequency changes depending on what speed it is. So if it was just on off, your frequency would be less. You'd have less interference. Okay. But when you do it into it's called a pulse width modulator. And so it's turning a DC current or DC voltage signal into an AC signal. So AC, your house, right? You plug it into the wall. Mm-hmm. It's AC. It can push to and from on the same line. Send and receive. Okay. DC is plus and minus. You don't push minus against the plus. Well, that doesn't work real well for motors. So for variable speed, so we have to chop it up. We get a smoother push, like all your elevators, for example, are going to be DC motors because they operate more smoothly, but we have to modulate them for that speed. So it's not just instantly hammered on and go up. It's a ramp up. That also changes the speed to throttle that. That's what that pulse width modulator does and doesn't let my cycle go as high. It only lets it go this high. And so instead of giving it a hard push.
So what causes it interference on some?
So again, now we go back to why is mine?
Yeah.
As my buddies is not, why is mine? And it can come down to degradation in the trolling motor, the insulation, the armature inside can start breaking down if it's older. It can literally come down to wiring. There is no simple answer when it comes to interference. I can have two boats identically rigged by the same person, both have interference, and the solution is going to be different on both.
Really?
Unfortunately, that's what it is. And there's a kind of a sequence you go through. Usually the first thing that I do, because I want to know if the trolling motor is doing it, if there's any paint removed from the trolling motor, I take a wire and I put a hose clamp on it and clamp it on it. And then I run that wire to the negative of the cranking battery. So not the same trolling batteries, but the cranking battery. And what I'm doing is I'm draining that EMF out of the world. Or take that same wire and drop it off into the water. And you say, wait a minute, you're just putting it back into it. Water is a ground. So boats are floating around. We talk about water ground, we talk about negative, we talk about positive. Water ground, because it's connected, the same reason why we got off the water.
Yeah.
That is connected to the bottom. If lightning hits out there, we're in trouble. So it's a conductive.
Okay.
So basically creating a ground loop back to ground as opposed to coming back to the circuit. Okay. I feel I can see the look on his face, so I'm hoping that comes
75% there.
Okay. So
that's a win.
So
that's passing. That's
essentially
C.
what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to drain that EMF
to figure out where the interference is coming from.
Correct.
Is it coming from
the trolling motor itself?
The trolling motor itself. Is it coming from your wiring? Is it coming? Okay. I see what you're saying.
That's it. You know, I mean, I've had them where I've had to ground the foot pedal. So there was no change in the interference when I did that little test on the head. But as soon as I ground the foot pedal, it cleared up.
I got you.
And so, you know, you just have to get
that's why it's so frustrating.
That's why it's so frustrating.
And then if you have someone who doesn't exactly understand how it all works and what causes it, they just know that the last boat, it was like this. And 100%. Then they're like, well, we don't know this. Then it must be your batteries. Or then it must be your wiring. And then you end up changing all this stuff and it still doesn't fix it because you haven't understood the root of the cause.
100%. And that's why it's so frustrating. And it's frustrating for us when we do it, you know, and I wish there was like, okay, do this and you're going to be done. And that's just not it, you know.
We're going back to an easier question. Colton's had enough of this. He just wants to know what color palette to use for the best to find subtle hard spots.
All right. Well, that's the problem is, honestly, with that is a lot of this comes down to a personal, how your eyes are. For me, that inverse grayscale is phenomenal, you know, because hard spots are going to show up brighter. Now this is where running that contrast lower is going to be better, because then I'm ignoring semi hard spots, and that one hard spot's going to really stick out when I'm running that contrast lower. And so it's not so much the color palette as much as it is that contrast. Now, with that being said, you saw that inverse grayscale. That is a well-kept secret that I'm going to get hate mail later for telling people about. Even though everyone's had it, too many people are afraid to push buttons and change. If I can tell you one thing, do not be afraid to change your color palette. Don't be afraid to push buttons. Like, there's this fear of pushing buttons.
I have that fear.
He has that fear. He has that fear.
I called Scott and been like, can I push this button?
The answer is yes, you can push that button, you know. And so don't be afraid to experiment, you know. And if you're worried about it, pull up your side imaging, that screen, that menu screen we were in, take pictures of it. And then that way you can get back to it. You can go back to it, you know.
That's smart.
And then it frees you up to go play, and you'll find things that you didn't even realize you could do.
So really the answer is learn how to tweak your unit, and then you can find what color palette is best for that hard spot based on water clarity, bottom composition around it, depth, speed, the whole nine.
Exactly. So when you're looking for that
magic bullet,
it's not a magic bullet, because we can get into the scroll speed we talked about.
This is where you talk about, you know, you're sitting around and you hear a guy go, yeah, that dude is really good with his electronics. That's what that means. It means that he can get on the water. He can tweak all this stuff to make what he's looking for pop, identify it, understand how it sits up. Good with electronics isn't just understanding what you're seeing or knowing where to look. It's maximizing your unit's potential.
Well, and it also, you have to go into it with a plan. I wish there was a magic button where it says, boom, I can see the best brush piles, the best hard spots, the best shell beds, the best grass lines with this one setting. And that's just not the way it is.
See, that was my thought. So like 10 years ago, I had this idea. I thought it would be the greatest concept ever, that you could buy a patch or a download or something, and it would be like Mike McClellan's Table Rock settings.
Yeah.
And you would just plug it in and it would do it. Or it would be like Kevin Van Dam's side image settings, and you would just put the chip in and it would set your unit up. But now, I mean, I didn't have an understanding of how that works. There is no magic set. There's good settings. There's a setting that works for everything. But
and that's where most people find themselves. They've adjusted it or had someone adjust it to the body of water they were on that day, and it was probably a pretty good setting. And then they go to another body of water, and it's not ideal for that body of water, but it's still pretty good. And so they're like, you know what? I can see that obvious brush pile.
And that's what we did on the water today in the first half with that side imaging. It was the first time that you could say, hey, look at how it sucks on this. Look at the speed on this. Look at the color on this, the depth, the understanding. And that's where you have to see it to understand it.
And that's what it is. And that's where I say, don't be afraid to touch the buttons on that. And I will say something on the Garmin's, and I didn't get into this because, again, talking about going 10 layers deep. On my Garmin's, on that screen, there's a presets menu. So I can go set it up. I can set my color palette. I can set my range. I can set the noise reject. I can do all of that. And this is for the side, the down. This is not just talking Livescope. But this is why I run those GPS maps units, because they give me that ability to do it. So I may have a color palette that's set inverse grayscale, and I may name it general, or like just general graphing, or I may have one that I set up for grass, and I may have one set up for brush piles or hard spots, and I can set presets, and all I literally go in and do is I hit one button and it changes my settings instantly.
Okay. And
so that is one reason why I run those 1243s, and that's in the GPS map family. Unfortunately, the Garmin Echo map family doesn't allow that, but the GPS map family does. And I'm going to be doing a video on that here before too long, just another Bass Tank tech tip, because you do need to see it, and I was going to get into it today. We just obviously got ran off the water.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll wrap things up. I know you have to get back to the Bass Tank headquarters. We'll take a couple more questions, but we are talking with the owner of the Bass Tank, Scott Palmer, both on and off the water this morning. Fortunately, we're on Shawnee Twin Lakes. It's a good little lake close to the house. Yeah. And we just decimated someone's favorite point, I'm sure.
I'm sorry, whoever that is. I am sorry. I apologize.
It's a hate mail from one guy. We'll be back right after this. It's BTL, a little bonus edition, BTL on Tuesday, June 27th.
The new Puma STS has been redesigned from the ground up. With the angler, design, function, and performance in mind, nothing on this new offering was compromised, and the only thing carried over from the previous version is the name. Based on the Soft Touch series hull that started with the flagship Jaguar, this new model is nimble and performs incredibly well at all speeds with either a 250 or 300 horsepower engine. Featuring a new 96-inch wide-body footprint, this hull measures out at 20 foot 7 inches in length. Industry-leading design coupled with tournament-winning performance. The Puma STS from Basscat. Feel the rush.
Everything you need, one legendary brand. Top one on Strike King.
So I'm a big guy, a lunker, a two sandwich eating kind of man. And on behalf of all of those bigger, I gotta say it once and for all, it's bad enough that the fish look smaller in our hands. The last thing we should have to worry about is getting quality outdoor clothing that fits. Avco, any fish, any water.
Elite Series Pro Daryl Gleason here. My Pro Guide batteries keep me going on those long tournament days and long practice days. Always plenty of juice, never fail. The best part about Pro Guide batteries, it's the people behind the company. They have over 40 years experience in the battery business, keeping all of us fishermen out on the water longer, catching more fish. Check them out at ProGuideBatteries.com.
What's up, Bass Talk Live fans? Brandon Polnick here. And ever since I won a couple Bassmaster Elite Series events on X-Zone Lures, I've been getting a bunch of questions of what makes them so special and different. And really, the truth is, it's in the details. The little details, things like no cheap fillers in their plastic. That gives you more lifelike action, more realistic and vibrant colors. But don't just take my word for it. Go to www.xzonelures.com and check them out for yourself.
I'm the kind of guy that never leaves the house without a pocket knife, and Gamakatsu's come out with the EDC series of knives. EDC stands for everyday carry, so whether you're on the water or off, you can always have it with you. The best thing about it to me is that assisted open feature. With this D2 blade, you've got it right here at your fingertips, so if you can't find your scissors, you need to cut a knot, you need to cut your braid, you've always got it. Make sure you check it out. Never leave home without your Gamakatsu EDC knife.
Born in Japan, using technology, innovation, and precision, Sunline produces the widest selection of fishing lines at the most technologically advanced line factory in the world. Manufactured at the strictest tolerances to produce victories at the highest levels of tournament bass fishing. From household names like Christie, Swindle, and Cruz, to young guns like Cook, Logan, New, and Welcher, they all trust Sunline to take them to the top of the leaderboard. Choose the line that will give you the strength to guarantee your confidence. Sunline.
All right, welcome back. Scott Palmer from the Bass Tank in studio, answering all kinds of your questions. And if you're watching the replay to this show, You're a bold man for doing this again, because I know you got inundated last time with it, but worked through it. Scott has set up an info line. If you have questions, and obviously the Bass Tank has solutions for those questions with their online store. And I mean, you are a for-profit business. You are not a volunteer. Know, you're not like the public library. Right. So anyway, but if you're looking, have questions about stuff, what is that email? It's
questions@thebasstank.com.
Questions@thebasstank.com.
Correct.
You are the one who monitors it. You will eventually get to all the questions. I know last time you had like 75, 100 emails right off the hopper, but you ended up working your way through that. So if it's something that you're looking to get and you have questions, if you have products that have issues, if you want to upgrade, if you're listening to this show and something didn't make sense, that you want to connect the dots to help you better understand electronics,
and I want to preface it. If you're looking to upgrade, like you're wanting information about new products you're considering, go ahead and call our sales line.
Okay.
But if you've got, the questions that we couldn't get to here, guys, I want to answer them. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time. And some of these are follow-ups. And that's what that questions@thebasstank.com is. And forgive me, I'm monitoring about 8 email addresses separately. And so I'll get to them. I got to all of them last time. It just took me a little bit. But I think everybody was pretty happy with that called in. I like learning too, because I want to know every problem that's out there so I can know how to fix it.
A couple more questions.
Yeah, let's do it.
I have no idea if this is an applicable question, but Chris would like to know, is it possible to network connect a Striker 9SV to a 106 Echo?
It is not. That's not true. You could do it through the old NEMA protocol, but if you want to share waypoints, you could do it with NEMA. But if you want to do it to share like Livescope, it will not. And share sonar data, it will not. But you could do it with the old NEMA 0813 protocol.
Is that hard to do?
It's 2 wires, data sharing.
Okay.
Yeah. So we actually have it on my website right now. It's called a data sharing cable you'll need. And you'll be like, what is this? It's a brown and a purple wire.
But all that will do though is share waypoints.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Which, if that's what he's wanting to do, then the answer is yes.
Then yes.
If he's wanting to see the
sonar, if you want to share sonar and Livescope, then no, that's not that.
So you might have gotten lucky there.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that might be what it is. Because I mean, I would be a guy who doesn't really care. I mean, it'd be nice to have a Garmin on the back where I could see my Livescope, but right now, like, I don't.
Yeah, you're up front using it. So,
here's a hard hitting question. Charles would like to know: is Garmin coming out with a new Livescope soon?
I'll answer this the way I answer, and this is across the board with any manufacturer. They're always working on something new. Mm-hmm. And I say that with no real knowledge, no backdoor knowledge, nothing, whatever. The minute the 34 came out, I promise you, somebody was saying, "How are we going to replace this?" Mm-hmm. Probably before the 34 came out, because they're
probably the minute the 32 came out,
right?
And it took that many years to.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, are they working on its replacement? I would bet my house that they are. Now, it may be 6 days, it may be 6 years before that happens. So, I don't know. They're pretty. If you want my honest opinion, I think they're going to continue to tweak this with software updates, because there's a lot of capabilities still left in the 34. And I'm going to go on a limb, and I may be wrong on this. The 34 has a lot of capabilities from a transducer standpoint. The 32 is limited just based on the physical makeup of it. 34 has a lot of abilities. I think what we're going to get stuck by is the black box itself, the GLS 10 sonar module, basically.
It's going to.
And I could see an enhanced box coming out. Okay. Now that may not be the case. I may be completely wrong, and I'm spitballing here, but I could see, just knowing how, with my background in some of the electronics designs that I saw, that's what happened. So they pushed it beyond what the GLS 10 can do long term, but the idea would be to come in and basically upgrade your entire system, a transducer in a box at a time. Mm-hmm. That may not come to fruition. They may say, no, that doesn't make sense, but I could see that being a possibility.
Like eventually, if you want your vehicle to go faster, perform better, you got to have a bigger engine.
Yep. Right. Exactly. Same body, same everything. It's just, the bearings, everything on your vehicle is designed to go faster than what your vehicle can actually go, unless you do some modifications.
Brandon Ackerson wants to know, he says, I have a voltage drop between my graphs, the dreaded voltage drop.
Yeah.
My console graph will read 0.5 to 0.8 lower than my front graph. Never shows a full charge either. Only gets to 12.3. He said he has tightened all his connections and has a new battery.
Okay. So as long as we are using the proper gauge wire, this is one of those things where, let me just talk about the elephant in the room. These voltage sensing circuits in these units is not the most precise. It's not calibrated all the time. I mean, they're good, but there's probably a 1/10 to 2/10 of a differentiation that I would say a plus or minus degree of. So 12.3 is not bad. What battery is he running? Is that an AGM? I would expect that to be at 12.4 to 12.5. What is it actually reading at the battery? Take a voltage reading at the battery and see what it is. The other thing is, if you're able, switch the units. So you've got your unit at the front and unit at the console, switch them.
That way you could tell.
And then is it the sensing circuit on the unit itself? And then you say, okay, hey, it's just the unit. We're fine.
So one could be 0.2 low and one could be 0.2 high. And then there's a difference of 0.5 and you're like, what the heck? But it's just because the units are different.
But if you switch
He's running
them,
the Pro Guide AGMs.
Yeah. So that should be in that 12.4 to 12.5 range. 12.3 is close. So there's a little bit of voltage drop, but again, we're within that realm of.
So it's not a dire issue, right?
Not a dire issue. Now, the other thing, again, I wish I could have a follow-up, would be, is it, as you go over time, is that dropping quickly to 11.9 or is that staying 12.3 all day long?
But it couldn't, you said it could also be improper gauge wire, too small to where the back graph is getting full power, but because you have small wire, it's running. You don't know what else is branched off that it's pulling power from, that it's getting less power. So you go with like a harness or something.
Right. Exactly. That's where a dedicated harness, like what we sell, eliminates that, because we don't want to go.
It's dropping quickly.
Okay, so we've got it. We've got an issue there, and I would switch the units to see if it's following the unit or if it's following the console. Basically, is it staying put or is it following the unit? Okay. So let's figure out where our problem is, and then is the console going through a fuse block, like a factory fuse block, or an aftermarket cheap fuse block? I'm going to say something, and I'll be honest with you, I'm probably going to hurt some feelings. Guys, we spend a lot on these electronics.
Yeah.
Do not go buy a $20 fuse block. There's a reason why it's $20. I mean, and what I mean by that is I pull them out and they're just corroded to non-belief. And when you put it in, you may perform well, but that corrosion starts and that adds resistance in my voltage.
Those fuse blocks are those little things that you put on my boat, like the two separate ones that have the.
That's a terminal block.
Oh, okay.
So that is a direct connection.
Sorry.
It's just a fuse block is like a distribution block. I run power in, and then I'm like you talked about, branching multiple things off, and run your electronics on a dedicated.
He said it goes down to 11.6 after a few hours.
Yeah, that we've got a problem there. But is the front graph staying high?
Okay.
So there's more to ask him to send me his question.
Info.
Yeah, questions at the
questions at the bass tank.
Yeah, because I need to get some follow up on that. So I definitely will reach out to him.
Yeah.
But
all right, let's end it. Let's take one more. He said it's a factory wired Phoenix 22.
Okay. Yeah. Tell him to hit me up and we'll
questions at the bass tank. We're gonna end it on probably the greatest electronics question that I think everyone has struggled or knows someone who has struggled with this or has been in the boat with someone who has struggled with this. And it's Keenan Moore. He said, when I start my main engines, all my graphs turn off.
Yep.
The boat is new to me. Really digging into it would take a lot of work, I'd assume.
No, it's going to be one of two things. Either your battery is undersized. It's an old battery. He said it was new to him, so that tells me it's used. So the battery's either old, degraded, not sized properly, or most likely your gauged wire, your wiring that I just talked about with the previous listener, is not sized right, because what you're experiencing is a huge voltage drop, but you're basically getting a load on that battery. And because the voltage drops, your units are shutting off or flickering. So the first thing I would do would be to check the battery. And if it seems like it's aged, it's a new battery.
What are you looking at? How can you tell if it's aged?
So if they did what they're supposed to, there's little stickers on it, and they'll either be a number with a letter, typically it's the letter in a year, or there'll be the little stickers that said like August, and there'll be like little, and they'll pop those out, and that tells you when that battery is installed.
Okay.
your local parts store, out here, O'Reilly's AutoZone, they will load test batteries.
And if you don't know how that battery's been treated over the years too, you don't know if it's been run into the ground, if it's been you don't know.
Has it been set there without being charged, and then they try to bring it up, and so that all these things factor into it. But the other one, and I think most likely what you're going to find is the wire is probably going to be undersized.
Okay.
Poorly.
And then that's just changing out that wire.
Yep. Then a simple harness. Like, again, I'm hammering this home because it's very simple, but it's the answer.
Like, you think I could even install a harness?
I think you could.
Seriously?
I think that's a challenge.
No.
I think that's a challenge.
I've already got one. I don't want to jack stuff up. But I hear everyone talk about how simple it is to install the harness.
Yeah.
But I have such a lack of understanding. Is it literally just replace exactly this? I mean, I don't know. Maybe that might be a video.
So it's color coded.
You think that should be a video in the future where I see if I could do it?
I think it is. I think your listeners.
Trust me, if I could do a harness, then
Yeah. The hardest part about running the harness, and it doesn't matter if, like, this is something we deal with on a daily basis. No two boats are the same.
Yeah.
Again, we can have the same boats. We could take your boat and my boat and set it in my shop, and we could go do an install. Mm-hmm. And your boat the wires may push perfectly fine. It'd be like, oh man, that was easy. And mine, we may take 5 hours to push the same. And like, why on earth? Mm-hmm. Does your tape hit the wrong spot? Whenever they zip tied or they put them in, when they put the factory stuff in there, there's just natural variations. And so each boat is a new game. It's fun. Can you do it? Absolutely.
It's thrilling.
Yeah. So it's patience.
He said he's in the same boat as me. He goes, I know nothing about nothing. All right. Let's wrap this thing up. What else do we have going on? Any sales, anything special going on at thebasstank.com?
So right now, one thing that we do have is, back on Black Friday, we had the 93s with GT54 transducer for $699. Well, we have been able to get from Garmin 93 with 54 transducers, the refurb. So basically they went out and someone had a problem, sent them back. Garmin they basically go back, and everyone hears refurb. They're like, oh, this is used. No, it's not. Garmin goes and makes it like a new unit, but because it's been in someone's hands, they can't sell it like a new unit. Well, they give us the option to acquire some of those from time to time. So we have those right now running a sale for $649.99. Still has a Garmin 1-year warranty. Best deal out there right now. Nobody else has it. And so that's it. Also, our Pro Guide batteries are on sale. We're selling it's the 50 amp hour. This is not a trolling battery. It's not a cranking battery, but an electronics only battery for, I believe it's $449. It's on our website right now. And so we're doing some cool stuff right there.
Good stuff. I'll crank the music back up. Well, I appreciate you bringing your boat down for a half hour side imaging.
It's all right. Good. I got to run up and down the road.
Can I get you to commit that we'll do it again?
Absolutely. I want to. I
think that the that venue is good 5G. There's just enough stuff on the bottom there that makes it interesting, but not too much to where you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's it. It makes it stand out so we can talk about what we're seeing and not just get, mixed in with it, get lost.
You're officially back to work. You spent 7 days chasing smallies in God's country?
8, but who's counting? My thumb is almost healed up right here. I'm still getting some.
I'm headed up there. Look at that schedule right there. Oneida, ICAST, St. Lawrence, Lake Erie, and then the upper part of the Mitten in Michigan. So I have a chance to catch a 5-pound smallie out of Erie, out of Michigan, out of the St. Lawrence, and out of Oneida.
All just so fun. They're just so fun.
All right, this has been another edition of BTL Bass Talk Live. Go back and watch the On the Water segment that we did first thing this morning until we got pushed off the water due to some inclement weather. Also, go check out the Bass Tank on all of their social media platforms. Very active on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook with all their latest deals. Guys, this takes a lot of time and effort on both of our parts to kind of put this together, to get on the water, to get everything. Give us a thumbs up if you like what you see. Support the brands that support BTL. This is a prime example of bringing education and entertainment to you because of the support of BTL listeners to the Bass Tank, which comes back, which leads to more free information, which leads to using the bass tank because you trust and understand what is going on with your boat and your hard-earned money. So I'm off my soapbox on that. The older I get, the more I try to understand the business thing. I was used to be like, why does Jeffries always push this? And I'm like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
All right, we'll see everybody later.
See you.